A literature review can be more than just something you have to do as a graduate student. In fact, if approached correctly, a literature review can be very helpful for you as a student when you are thinking about your research project, even trying to apply for grants and preparing for your dissertation. So today we are talking about what is a literature review and the most important considerations when writing one. So a literature review is a written document that takes a reader through a series of scholars or scholarship or history of scholars and scholarships for a specific purpose. And usually this purpose is to discover or to illuminate knowledge gaps or holes within scholarship or areas within the field that needs to more development or more exploration. Now, like I said at the beginning of this video, a literature review can be used for a variety of different purposes. In most cases, graduate students may be expected to have an entire chapter that is a literature review within their dissertation. In other cases, a literature review may find itself within your research proposal, or what we call a prospectus. It can also exist within grants or when you're applying for postdocs or fellowships. So it's important to understand there are a variety of different places that a literature review can end up, and even ultimately could end up being a written document that you get published. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to focus on the literature reviews I personally have most experience doing, and that's for research proposals and for grants. Now, with that said, regardless, a literature review is not just a summary of scholarship. It is not just an overview of what the past scholars have said, just to prove that you've done all the readings. Instead, especially if you're writing a literature review for a grant proposal or for a prospectus or research proposal, what a literature review is an explanation of what the past scholarship has talked about or discussed and why it is important or how it is important. But instead, and this is especially important if you're writing a grant proposal or doing your prospectus or research proposal, a literature review is an explanation of the past literature and the readings or the thoughts or theories that have been important, but still need work. They still need your intervention as the researcher. They still need more explanation as a field, or a deeper dive, or more critique as a field or as a discipline. And that's why you are writing this literature review, to illuminate these areas that need more development. And as a researcher or as a graduate student, you may be the one suggesting that you can fill in these gaps, or you are illuminating these gaps so you can think about other opportunities or other areas within the field that can be explored for future research projects. Also, if you are a graduate student and you are writing a dissertation chapter or you are writing a proposal of any kind, a literature review can validate your academic or scholarly decisions within your research project. And what this can look like is, if you are studying or approaching a well-studied topic, but you want to do so in a completely different methodological way or in a completely different theoretical way, you can use a literature review to validate or to reaffirm the decisions that you are making and why this new approach or these new theories can bring new information to light for your discipline or for your research topic. So in this way, you can also use your literature review to not only illuminate that there's a gap, but also present pliable or applicable solutions based off of another field's extensive research by bringing it into conversation with your scholars, your scholarship, and your research topic or field. So in the simplest form, a literature review is basically saying, this is what has been said, this is what has yet to be said, and then depending on what your approach is or the purpose of your literature review, you are either illuminating what needs to be said or how what has been said in another field will illuminate or help you say something different or better in your field. It is also really important to know you just can't know everything, and you literally cannot read everything within your field. So when you are approaching a literature review, it can be really intimidating to feel like you have to claim a knowledge gap or a hole within the scholarship, especially if you haven't literally read every book or every text that exists within your field. But I think personally, the word gap can be a little misleading. When we think about a gap, we think of about a huge gorge or a giant hole that is very obvious that needs to be filled. Within academia, it doesn't really work like that. Instead, what can be useful is when you are approaching your literature review, instead of looking for giant gaps that nobody has addressed or giant holes in the scholarship that need to be filled, think of things as a deprioritized question or as lingering questions that could benefit from more attention. And this way you are illuminating a gap because not a lot of people have discussed it, but it's not a huge gaping hole that nobody has attempted. And in that way, you can start to really see more opportunity for academic innovation versus looking for something that nobody has ever discussed before. Now you're looking at things that people may have tangentially referred to or have approached a little bit, but nobody's ever really dived deep into that topic or really unpacked to an extensive or expansive level. And now you have the unique skills, experience, or awareness to bring that expanded thought to your field or to the research. So now you know what a literature review is, and you have a better understanding of what is a knowledge gap and how to think about it. So then how do you approach writing a literature review? Well, first, when you start to write a literature review, you do need to have an understanding of what is your scope of your literature. What are the readings that you're going to include, and what are the readings you are not going to include? And again, the purpose of this is not to read every single reading in your field, but really have a good idea of a general question or concern that you're interested in. But instead, you want to have a really good idea of what is a general question or a concern or a topic that you're really interested in, and that will help guide you towards having more specific readings. Instead of trying to uncover every single discussion on a very specific topic, now you have an opportunity to guide your conversation towards a main focus. And one of the easiest way to do this is to start building an annotated bibliography and writing strong annotations. Now, if you're somebody who's not very comfortable with annotations or don't really understand what is an annotated bibliography or how to make it strong, I have a past video that just came out that should be able to help guide you through the process and figure out what annotation is best for you. But after you do a reading and you create a really good annotation for it, you want to pause and reflect and ask yourself some questions about what is left to be desired of that reading, or what do you wish that reading would have discussed more. By taking this time to reflect, you can start to see what lingering or deprioritized questions exist within each reading. Now, if you get to the end of a reading and you've done your annotation and you personally just feel like you just can't think of any questions, or you can't really recognize any areas that they didn't delve deeper into, I would encourage you to ask yourself some of these questions. What about this reading do I wish they would have expanded on more or given more time to explain deeper? Were there any parts of their argument that just didn't feel like it made sense to you? Do the main claims of this article seem practical? And if they do, in what context do they seem practical? And in what context would they not be practical? How can their main claims be extended further? Or what could challenge their main claims? Or what could challenge their main claims further? By taking time to write down those questions and to answer them themselves, you're starting to think about what are the gaps within the knowledge, or the deprioritized questions, or the lingering questions that still exist. No one article, no one book can answer every question that it's attempting to think about or to address. And so as a result, when you are reading these literature or when you are examining these texts, you want to be hyper aware of what they're not doing versus how we're usually expected to read the literature, which is being aware of what they are doing. And by changing that little bit of our approach of the reading, we'll be able to start to see what are the limits to their articles. What are the things they could answer well, but the things that they couldn't get to in this time, or that others may have critiqued about this book as well. Or in other words, you're really examining what are the limits of each written text. What is the scope of each text, and what is it that they were able to do well, but then ultimately, what were they not able to achieve? And this way you're able to start thinking about gaps, holes, or areas of improvement that can be woven into and guide your literature review. Then after you've done your annotated bibliographies and you thought about the questions that you have about the readings, you want to start making connections. Now, if you started your literature search by focusing on a main question or a main theme, then you probably already have a natural focus or natural grouping of readings that just make sense. If you are somebody who are approaching this literature review and you were just reading a bunch of different things at once, don't panic, there's still an option for you. What you would do in that case is you would look back at the questions that you wrote after your annotations, the list that I just gave you all, and really start to reflect, what readings may be in conversation with each other. Now, this could be a variety of different ways that you are making these connections. Some readings may be grouped together because they all talk about this topic, but none of them answer this question. Another group of readings may be half of them talk about this topic and don't answer this question, and half of them are responding to these readings in a certain way, but they still don't quite do this other thing that you think might be useful. So by being creative, sitting down, you can even make a mind map of trying to make connections, and to group your readings into logical connections can help create your topics or subtopics of your literature review. Again, it is very important to remind you that a literature review is not just a summary. Instead, it is a collection of literature or scholarship that has been grouped together or put in conversation together for a purpose. And it is up to you, the writer, to make that purpose very obvious to the reader. And oftentimes that purpose is to discover knowledge gaps. But the most important thing is that it has an organization and ultimately a general argument or something that you're trying to divulge or help the reader discover through reading this literature review. Now, something else to be aware of is that a lot of readings may have multiple gaps, and it is up to you to make the executive decisions on which ones are the most important, and connecting them to readings that either reinforce what you're demonstrating or show even more scholarship that is also neglecting or deprioritizing these questions or these lingering concerns. In other words, the most important thing when writing a literature review is that you, the author, are demonstrating why these literatures or why these texts need to be discussed and how these connections are worth noting. And then for grants or research proposals more specifically, the purpose of your literature review is to really demonstrate that there are all these problems or all these areas within the literature that talk about very important things, but don't address something specific. And your purpose for a grant or for a research proposal is to demonstrate to the reader that you as a graduate student or as a scholar are able to fill in these gaps through your knowledge, through the other readings that you're doing outside of the field, and that way you can bring new knowledge and bring the field or push the field forward. And this isn't a quick process that just happens overnight. Writing a literature review requires a lot of self-reflection, a lot of thinking, and obviously a lot of reading. So if you're interested in learning more tips and tricks about grad school and writing, definitely subscribe. If you found at least 2 things useful to this video, hit that thumbs up. And as always, if you have any lingering questions for me, comments, video ideas, or just want to say hi, leave a comment down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.